You're standing in front of the dressing room mirror, holding that shirt that costs 3 times what you should spend. And for a moment, you feel something strange, as if this garment were going to change something fundamental in you. It's not the first time. Yesterday it was the latest phone model. Last week, the premium headphones. The month before, the online course that promised to transform your life. Each purchase comes accompanied by that same ephemeral sensation of being about to become someone better. More complete, more something, but always. Inevitably, a few weeks later, that familiar emptiness returns. That restlessness whispering that something is missing. You've been told you're materialistic. Your parents hint at it when they see your bank statements. Your friends joke about your shopping addiction. And you mentally flagellate yourself every time you give in to another consumption impulse. But here's the truth. No one has told you. You're not materialistic. What you're doing is much deeper and, paradoxically, much more spiritual than you imagine. You're seeking transcendence, that connection to something greater than yourself, that sensation of purpose and fulfillment the human soul has yearned for since time immemorial. The problem isn't your search. The problem is that you're directing it toward the wrong places. Carl Jung saw this clearly when he wrote about modern man's spiritual emptiness. We live in an era where we've been taught that transcendence is superstition, that the only real thing is the material, the quantifiable, what you can touch and possess. But the human soul doesn't understand materialistic paradigms. The soul seeks the infinite, the eternal, the sacred. And when it doesn't find legitimate channels for that search, it begins projecting those transcendent needs onto material objects. It's like trying to quench thirst by drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Think about the last time you bought something expensive you really wanted. I'm not referring to utilitarian purchases, but those acquisitions that excited you, that made you fantasize about how they would change your life. Remember that sensation at the moment of purchase, the accelerated heartbeat, the feeling of doing something significant, the almost spiritual anticipation. What you felt wasn't material greed. It was your soul recognizing a transformation ritual, albeit a false one. Our ancestors had initiatic ceremonies, rites of passage, sacred moments where human beings transitioned from one state of consciousness to another. They had temples, not stores. They had sages, not influencers. They had spiritual practice, not retail therapy. But we, stripped of these sacred frameworks, have turned consumption into our only available ritual for trying to touch the transcendent. Modern neuroscience shows us something fascinating. When we anticipate a purchase that excites us, our brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter that's activated during mystical experiences, deep meditation, and moments of genuine spiritual connection. Your brain literally can't distinguish between anticipating buying something meaningful and anticipating an encounter with the sacred. This isn't coincidence. It's evidence that you're using the right neurological mechanism, but pointing it toward the wrong target. Observe how modern marketing has completely usurped spiritual language. Products aren't sold as objects. They're sold as transformation experiences. Find your true self, elevate your vibration, unlock your potential, connect with your purpose. Every slogan is a promise of transcendence packaged in a product. Brands have become the new religions, shopping centers the new temples, and products the new sacred amulets. But there's something deeper operating here, something the ancient alchemists understood perfectly: projection. In psychology, projection is the mechanism by which we attribute to external objects qualities that really reside within ourselves. When you see that jacket and feel it will make you more confident, you're projecting your internal potential for confidence onto an external object. When you buy that gadget believing it will make you more productive, you're projecting your innate capacity for focus and discipline onto a tool. The ancients knew that true gold wasn't in metals, but in the transformation of the human soul. Alchemy was fundamentally an internal process disguised as external chemistry. You're doing the same thing, but in reverse. You're trying to achieve internal transformation through external acquisitions. It's inverted alchemy, and that's why it never works long-term. Here we arrive at the first pillar of understanding, misdirected seeking. You're not buying objects, you're buying identities. Each product you acquire represents an idealized version of yourself you hope to manifest. The problem is that identities aren't bought. They're cultivated, developed, embodied through practice, discipline, and genuine inner transformation. Remember your childhood for a moment. What fascinated you more, the toy itself, or the stories you created with it? The object or the imaginary world it opened? Children intuitively understand that objects are portals to experiences, not ends in themselves. But at some point in the maturing process, we begin confusing the portal with the destination, the means with the end. The second pillar is recognition of disguised spiritual hunger. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and founder of logotherapy, observed that modern neurosis arises fundamentally from what he called existential vacuum, the loss of meaning in a world that has lost its transcendent frameworks. When you don't have a purpose that transcends you, when there's nothing greater than yourself toward which to direct your vital energy, that energy is diverted towards substitutes. Consumerism is the opium of modern people, but not in the traditional Marxist sense. It's not a distraction imposed from above. It's a genuine spiritual search that has lost its way. Every time you buy something with the unconscious hope it will change your life, you're expressing a profound truth about human nature. We are beings of constant transformation, beings who yearn to grow, evolve, transcend our current limitations. The tragedy isn't in having that yearning. The tragedy is that we live in a culture that only offers us commercialized and impoverished versions of transcendence. It's as if we were born musicians trying to make symphonies with kazoos. We have the wrong instruments for the music our soul wants to play. Look around you. How many of the people you know are genuinely satisfied with their lives? I'm not referring to the superficial satisfaction they show on social media, but that deep peace emanating from someone who has found their place in the cosmic order. The scarcity of such people isn't coincidence. We live in the first civilization in human history that has attempted to build a completely secular society, stripped of transcendent dimensions. And we're seeing the psychological consequences of that experiment. The ancients had three categories of experience: the profane, the sacred, and the numinous. The profane was everyday life. The sacred were special moments and spaces where the divine became present. The numinous was that direct experience of the mysterious, what Rudolf Otto described as the mysterium tremendum, that produces simultaneous wonder and reverential awe. We have collapsed these three dimensions into one. Everything is profane, except for those fleeting moments when a purchase or commercial experience gives us a glimpse of something greater. The third pillar is understanding inverted alchemy. True alchemists knew that transmuting lead into gold was a metaphor for the spiritual transformation process. Lead represented ordinary consciousness, heavy, opaque, limited. Gold represented illuminated consciousness, brilliant, incorruptible, eternal. The alchemical process was a detailed map of how to transform the raw material of human experience into wisdom and spiritual realization. You're doing exactly the opposite. You're trying to use gold, money, resources, energy, to transform external objects with the hope that external transformation will change you internally. It's like trying to light a candle from outside to inside. The flame has to be born in the center and expand toward the periphery, not the reverse. But here comes the transformative insight that changes everything. Your impulse to buy isn't evidence of your superficiality. It's evidence of your repressed spiritual depth. Every time you feel that urgency to acquire something, your soul is sending you a message. I'm ready to grow, to transform, to experience something new. The problem isn't the impulse. The problem is the interpretation you give that impulse. Imagine you're a river that has lost its natural course. The water doesn't stop flowing. It simply finds other routes, though they may be less efficient and more destructive. Your spiritual energy is that river, and compulsive consumerism is the swampy terrain where your vital current is getting lost. But the water remains pure. It just needs to find its true course. Mystics of all traditions have understood that spiritual yearning is the most powerful force in the human universe. It's what moved Sufis to dance to ecstasy, what led Zen monks to meditate in caves for decades, what inspired Christian saints to renounce everything for invisible love. That same fire burns in you, but instead of feeding it with spiritual practice, you're feeding it with consumer products. This is where understanding becomes liberating. You don't have to kill your desire for transformation. You have to redirect it. You don't have to become ascetic. You have to become a conscious alchemist of your own transformation. The problem was never that you wanted to change. The problem was that you were taught change comes from outside to inside, when reality is exactly the opposite. Think about people you truly admire, those who radiate a kind of internal magnetism, who seem to have access to a source of satisfaction that doesn't depend on external circumstances. These people have achieved something money can't buy. They've found ways to satisfy their hunger for transcendence through means that truly nourish the soul. They've learned to generate internally what you're trying to import externally. Authentic spiritual practice isn't escapism. It's the most sophisticated technology that exists for consciousness transformation. When you meditate deeply, when you contemplate nature, when you dedicate yourself to an art or discipline with total devotion, when you serve something greater than your personal ego, you're activating the same brain centers that activate when you shop, but sustainably and nutritiously. The difference is like that between eating a balanced, nutritious meal versus consuming refined sugar. Both can give you energy temporarily, but one strengthens you long-term, while the other weakens you. Your soul is hungry for genuine spiritual nutrition, but you've been feeding it the spiritual equivalent of junk food. The fourth pillar is reconnection with the authentically sacred. This doesn't mean you have to convert to a specific religion or adopt beliefs that don't resonate with you. It means recognizing there are dimensions of human experience that transcend the purely material, and finding personal ways to connect with those dimensions. It can be through contemplating nature, where you recognize your place in life's great ecosystem. It can be through art, where you allow something greater than your personality to express itself through you. It can be through service to others, where you experience the deep satisfaction of being useful for something that transcends your personal benefit. It can be through philosophy or studying wisdom traditions, where your mind expands to encompass broader perspectives on existence. What's crucial is that you begin distinguishing between experiences that nourish your soul and those that merely stimulate it temporarily. Nutritious experiences leave you with a sense of fullness that grows over time. Merely stimulating experiences leave you with an emptiness that requires increasingly greater stimulation to be filled. Here comes the practical part of transformation, but not in the sense of rigid rules or prohibitions. It's about developing what Buddhists call mindfulness toward your consumption impulses. The next time you feel that familiar urgency to buy something that promises to change you, stop for a moment. Not to judge or repress yourself, but to investigate with genuine curiosity what you're really seeking. Ask yourself, what quality do I expect this object to give me? Confidence? Creativity? Connection? Purpose? Adventure? Once you identify the underlying quality, ask yourself, is there any way to cultivate this quality directly without needing an external object? The answer is almost always yes, but it requires more effort and patience than an impulsive purchase. If you seek confidence, perhaps you'll find it in developing a real skill, in overcoming a fear, in serving others who need you. If you seek creativity, perhaps you'll find it in dedicating regular time to an artistic practice. Regardless of results, if you seek connection, perhaps you'll find it in deep conversations with real people, in contemplating your interconnection with all life. The redirection process isn't instantaneous, and it doesn't have to be. Think of it as training a muscle that has been atrophied. You've spent years exercising your capacity to seek transcendence through consumption. Now you need time to develop your capacity to find transcendence through authentic means. But something beautiful happens when you begin this process. You discover that real satisfaction, the kind that doesn't need constant renewal, is much more accessible than you thought. It's available in this moment through your capacity for wonder, gratitude, conscious presence, love. It doesn't require buying anything. It requires remembering who you really are beneath all the layers of cultural conditioning. Mystics have spoken for millennia about the hidden treasure that lies in the heart of every human being. This treasure cannot be bought, stolen, lost, or destroyed. It's your essential nature, your immutable connection to the mystery of existence. When you touch this treasure, even briefly, you experience a richness that makes all external wealth irrelevant. I'm not suggesting you become ascetic or completely reject the material world. Objects have their place. They can be useful tools, sources of beauty, facilitators of meaningful experiences. The problem arises when you confuse tools with objectives, when you expect means to give you directly what can only come from ends. A musician doesn't confuse their instrument with music. A painter doesn't confuse their brushes with inspiration. A writer doesn't confuse their computer with ideas. Similarly, you can use material objects as instruments to express and facilitate your spiritual growth, without expecting them to give you that growth directly. Imagine how your relationship with possessions would change if you saw them as sacred tools instead of sources of identity. You would buy less, but appreciate more. You would choose more consciously, but cling less. You would use things to serve your authentic development instead of expecting your development to come from things. The fifth pillar is the practice of alchemical gratitude. This isn't the superficial gratitude that has become cliché in wellness culture, but a deep practice of recognizing the abundance that already exists in your present experience. When you truly understand the immensity of the gift of being conscious in this moment, in this mysterious universe, the urgency to acquire more naturally transforms into appreciation for what already is. But this gratitude must be cultivated like a fire that needs constant feeding. It requires daily practice, intentional attention, gradual training of perception to recognize the subtle richness that always surrounds you. The air you breathe, the complexity of your body functioning without your conscious control, your mind's capacity to generate thoughts and ideas, the beauty available to your senses in every moment. When you begin experiencing this perceptual abundance, something profound changes in your relationship with desire. Desires don't disappear, but they lose their compulsive quality. They become light preferences instead of desperate urgencies. You can want things without needing them, appreciate beauty without having to possess it, enjoy experiences without having to repeat them constantly. This transformation of the relationship with desire is what Buddhists call liberation from suffering, and what Christian mystics called spiritual freedom. It's not the absence of desires, but liberation from enslavement to desires. When you no longer need your desires fulfilled to be happy, paradoxically, you enjoy much more when they are fulfilled. Here we arrive at the heart of transformation, recognizing that you are already complete. This completeness isn't something you have to achieve. It's something you have to remember. You've been complete since the moment you were born, since before you were born, since always. The sensation of incompleteness that drives you to seek outside yourself is an illusion, though a very convincing one. This illusion is maintained because you've been conditioned to believe you are only your personality, only your personal history, only your social roles. But you are much more than that. You are the consciousness that observes all these aspects of yourself. You are the space in which all your thoughts, emotions, and experiences arise and disappear. You are a unique expression of the cosmic intelligence that animates the entire universe. When you touch this reality, even for an instant, you experience what Sufis called fana, the dissolution of the separate sense of self in existence's fundamental unity. In those moments, the idea that you need something external to be complete reveals itself as completely absurd. It's like an ocean thinking it needs more water. But living from this understanding requires constant practice, because the social and psychological conditioning pushing you toward external seeking is very strong. It's like swimming against a cultural current, flowing in the opposite direction. That's why all spiritual traditions have developed specific practices to strengthen your capacity to remember your true nature. Meditation is one of these practices, but not the only one. Any activity that connects you to your center, that makes you temporarily forget your small self and opens you to something vaster, is a form of spiritual practice. This can include walking in nature with complete attention, creating art from a place of authentic inspiration, having deep conversations where you truly listen and are heard, or dedicating yourself to a cause that transcends your personal interests. What's important is that these practices be regular and conscious. They can't be occasional or accidental if you want them to fundamentally transform your relationship with seeking external completeness. You need to create sacred spaces in your life where your soul can be nourished directly, without commercial intermediaries. As these practices strengthen, something beautiful begins to happen. Your relationship with the material world becomes freer and more joyful. You can enjoy beautiful things without clinging to them. You can appreciate abundance without being addicted to it. You can use objects as tools for your growth and expression without confusing them with sources of your happiness. This is the state Taoists called Wu Wei, action without effort, flowing with life's natural current without resistance or compulsion. When you reach this state, your consumption choices naturally become wiser, more conscious, more aligned with your authentic values. You no longer buy to fill emotional voids, because you've learned to fill those voids directly through your spiritual practice. You no longer buy to create an identity, because you've discovered your true identity that needs no external accessories. You no longer buy to feel special because you've recognized you're already infinitely unique and valuable as you are. This doesn't mean you become ascetic or reject all material pleasures. It means your relationships with external objects and experiences become freer, more conscious, more elegant. Like an expert dancer who moves with music without being controlled by it, you can move in the consumption world without being consumed by it. The final phase of this transformation is conscious integration. This is where you bring your spiritual understanding back to the practical world without losing connection to your center. You begin seeing every purchase choice as an opportunity for spiritual practice. Every arising desire as a teacher, showing you something about yourself. When you feel the impulse to buy something, instead of reacting automatically or repressing yourself guiltily, you can respond with conscious curiosity. What is this desire teaching me about what my soul needs in this moment? How can I honor this need in the most nutritious way possible? What would be most loving toward myself in this situation? Sometimes the answer will be buying the object, but from a place of conscious choice instead of unconscious compulsion. Other times the answer will be seeking more direct ways to satisfy the underlying need. And other times, the answer will be simply feeling the desire completely without acting on it, allowing it to teach you about the transitory nature of all impulses. Each of these responses can be a form of spiritual practice when done with full awareness. There are no universally correct or incorrect answers, only answers that are more or less aligned with your authentic growth in each specific moment. Over time, you develop what we could call spiritual discernment, the capacity to instantly distinguish between impulses coming from your deep wisdom and those coming from your surface conditioning. This discernment becomes an internal compass guiding you not only in consumption decisions, but in all areas of your life. And here's the final magic of this transformation. When you stop seeking transcendence in the wrong places, you begin finding it everywhere. The same world that once seemed empty and only came alive through your purchases now reveals itself as infinitely rich and fascinating. The beauty you could once only possess, you can now appreciate freely. The abundance you once had to buy, you now recognize as your natural state. It's not that the world has changed, it's that your eyes have opened to see what was always there. It's as if you had been living in a palace thinking you were poor, because you only looked at the floor instead of lifting your gaze to see the marble columns, painted ceilings, infinite gardens that had surrounded you all along. This is true wealth, the capacity to recognize the inherent abundance in existence itself. It's not something you can buy, but it's something you can awaken. It's not something you can possess, but it's something you can be. It's not something you can lose, because it's what you are in your deepest nature. Your search was never wrong. It was just misdirected. Your yearning for transcendence is the most beautiful and sacred thing in you. It's what connects you to all the mystics, artists, philosophers, and seekers who have walked this planet before you. It's your personal participation in the universe's evolutionary impulse toward greater consciousness, greater beauty, greater love. Don't abandon this search. Simply redirect it toward where it can really find what it seeks. Your soul knows the way. It just needs you to stop distracting it with shiny substitutes and allow it to guide you toward the real source of what you've been seeking all this time. The transformation you seek isn't in any store, won't arrive in any package, can't be financed in installments. It's here now, in this moment, in your capacity to recognize the extraordinary miracle of being alive and conscious in this infinitely mysterious universe. It's in your ability to love, create, serve, grow, connect with the source of all that is. If this message has touched something in you, if you've recognized your own search in these words, then you've already begun the journey home. Share this understanding with others who are also seeking in the wrong places. Perhaps your words will be the key that helps them redirect their search toward where they can really find what their soul yearns for. Because in the end, we're all seeking the same thing, and we can all find it when we learn where to really look.